My name is Carrasco. I'm a director of public affairs at AT&T. Welcome to the AT&T Forum. This is our space for convening policy conversations that affect, in my particular case, our communities. And I want to take a moment to thank Rosa with ALLvanza, Robert with MMTC, and I want to thank OCA. I'm blanking on your name, and I just turned old too. Okay, yeah, sorry. I literally just went over 50, and it's like my mind is like downhill from there. This morning, I couldn't even remember, right? I mean, it's a real thing. And for you young ones out there, you may be thinking we're making it up. Trust us, we are not making it up. You will have a pen in your hand, and you will be like, I know what this is called. But for the life of me, I can picture it, but I cannot remember it. So, I apologize. So I'm thrilled to be hosting this conversation here today. I have remarks, so just bear with me. I'm thrilled to be hosting this conversation today. I want to take this moment to share that connection is something that we're deeply committed to at AT&T. Bridging the digital divide is a priority, and AT&T has committed $2 billion from 2022 to 2023 to these efforts. Among these, AT&T's connected learning centers provide internet access and educational resources to students and other community members. Let's also not forget that because of available government funding, new technology, and the current focus on digital equity, we are uniquely positioned to bring connectivity to underserved and unserved populations, and to flatten the social and economic barriers that are faced by our communities. Together, we are building this bridge to connectivity and creating a more equitable society. Muchas gracias, and let me introduce you, Rosa Mendoza.
I promise. Thank you, Celeste and AT&T for hosting us today. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rosa Mendoza, and I'm the president and CEO of ALLvanza. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. I want to start by thanking our event partners, the Multicultural Media, Telecom and Internet Council, MMTC. Thank you, Robert, for your partnership. And OCA, Asian Pacific American Advocates. Thank you, too, for your partnership. We've been doing these events for 3 years now, actually, but we've been doing them online because of COVID. So this is the first time we bring this event in person. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. ALLvanza is proud to partner with these organizations to present this latest installment in our Moving Underserved Communities Forward series, Understanding Artificial Intelligence and its Impact on Our Communities. We are fortunate to have a great panel of speakers to lead us in the conversation about artificial intelligence, one of the most talked about, but probably not the most well understood subject. Of the technological innovations that are bringing both disruption and opportunities to industries and communities, artificial intelligence is quickly becoming a presence in our lives, even if we're not aware of it. It has the potential to bring widespread benefits to underserved communities by improving infrastructure, expanding access to healthcare, expanding businesses, and a lot more. But as with other technological innovations, the expansion of AI could leave underserved communities left behind if we are not intentional about ensuring diversity in AI's development and helping members of underserved communities understand and have access to the opportunities AI can offer. ALLvanza, MMTC, and OCA host this event series to bring together smart and creative people like today's panelists to help us all find policy solutions to the challenges we face. And I'm looking forward to learning a lot more from them. And I hope that this conversation will lead to fruitful collaboration among those in the room. And now I would like to introduce our panel moderator, Jonathan B. Cohen, who is the finance partner at Wilkinson, Barker, Knauer, LLP, which is the firm in DC that leads in the tech and telecom space. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And Jonathan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rosa. And thank you to our sponsoring organizations. I'm going to just set the stage with a few words about our topic today. And to do that, I asked the latest high-profile innovation in artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, to write 150 words about our topic here today. Artificial intelligence has the potential to revolutionize numerous fields and industries, from healthcare and transportation to education and finance. However, there are growing concerns about how AI will impact underserved communities who may be left behind in the rapid pace of technological advancement. While AI has the potential to create new opportunities and address societal challenges, it also can exacerbate existing inequalities and discrimination. Underserved communities, including low-income individuals, people of color, and those with limited access to education and resources, may not have the same level of access to AI-driven innovations as more affluent or privileged groups. Furthermore, AI systems may perpetuate biases and discriminatory practices, particularly if the data used to train them is flawed or skewed. Therefore, it is essential to consider the potential effects of AI on underserved communities and to work to mitigate any negative impacts while promoting equitable access to the benefits of AI technology. Not bad. I assure you, however, that the questions and the answers here today will come from 100% from human beings. And to introduce those human beings, let me just tell you who's in front of you today. To my immediate right is Dr. Caterina Luppi. She is the Chief Information Officer of the DC Bar, the largest unified bar in the United States, and she's been there since 2018. Prior to that role, Caterina held IT executive roles at several organizations, including the Pan American Health Organization and the American Psychiatric Association. Caterina moved to the United States in 2003 from Geneva, Switzerland, where she worked at the European Center for Nuclear Physics and the UN High Commission for Refugees. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in physics from the University of Ferrara in Italy and a Ph.D. in particle physics from the University La Sapienza in Rome. Particle physics.
I commend the pronunciation of all the names.
Oh, thank you. I'm looking forward to hearing about how particle physics has anything to do with AI. Next to Caterina is Shane Tews, who is a non-resident senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and president of Logan Circle Strategies. Shane focuses on information and communication technology and cybersecurity policy issues, including privacy, data protection, artificial intelligence, antitrust, competition, broadband, 5G next generation networking, and the Internet of Things, Internet governance, and digital economic policy. That's all?
I know very little about particle physics, so I'm looking forward to learning a few things.
Shane also hosts a podcast called Explain to Shane on the AEI podcast channel. Next is Seth Billiau, who is a machine learning engineer at Booz Allen Hamilton, where he has served several federal clients on AI adoption and strategy. Seth also is a member of the firm's Asian Pacific Islanders Network and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council, where he leads a collaborative effort with OCA National to improve anti-Asian hate incident reporting and response. Seth is passionate about responsible, ethical, and explainable artificial intelligence and believes that designing responsible AI requires humans to remain in the loop. And lastly, at the end is Dr. Nicol Turner-Lee, a senior fellow in governance studies at the Brookings Institution, where she also directs the Center for Technology Innovation and serves as co-editor-in-chief of the Tech Tank podcast, which I commend to anyone interested in tech. Dr. Turner-Lee's research portfolio focuses on public policies designed to enable equitable access to technology, and she focuses on artificial intelligence, particularly machine learning algorithms and their unintended consequences on marginalized communities. She recently co-authored a paper on this subject and speaks regularly on topics of digital futures, AI and ethics, algorithmic bias, and the intersection between technology and civil and human rights. She's also an expert on topics that include online privacy, high-speed broadband and 5G networks, as well as the US digital divide, a topic on which she has a forthcoming book titled Digitally Invisible, How the Internet is Creating the New Underclass. So welcome to all of our panelists.
And John, and I'm a former MMTC alum.
Oh, you didn't put that in your bio.
I had to make
That's
sure,
very
because I know David
important.
Honig and everybody are watching, but I'm a former MMTC person.
So I'm going to start out with a question that I will ask all of our panelists to answer. AI is not new. The research in the field of artificial intelligence began at a conference at Dartmouth College in 1956, but it has catapulted into the national consciousness recently. Even technologists can't really agree on a single definition of the term artificial intelligence. And now we are moving into a world of generative AI, with Google and Microsoft this week announcing new ways for businesses to use this new tool. But many people are not familiar with how AI systems work and all the uses to which they can be put. The narratives surrounding the boom in AI tend to be either extremely optimistic about what AI technology might achieve, or laser focused on the potential worst consequences. So before we dive into some of the details, could each of you just give us your perspective on what AI is and should be, why it's important for underserved communities, and why we should be either excited about the opportunities or worried about the challenges, or both? And I'll start with you, Caterina.
So what AI is or should be, I mean, it should be whatever we want it to be. We created it after all. What it is, in my definition, is a machine that is able to make connection based on data that is inputted. And this connection get better and better because its processes get better and better. So it starts from a series of algorithms that are input by people, and it ends with a series of algorithms that they are actually created on a machine, and they are a merge of these processes and the data that has been input. This is a little more advanced than the initial version of AI that was more like an algorithm based on data, not necessarily a learning AI, but the impact, or the one that we should be concerned about or hopeful about, to me, is the AI that learns, because it's changed compared with what we're used to. I mean, we're used to algorithm over the place. I mean, when you get a commercial for cookies at 10 p.m. at night, and that's a machine that has determined that at 10 p.m. at night, probably people will be happy to have a snack while they watch TV, and therefore there is a commercial for a cookie. So all these behaviors are already, all these machines are already interfering with our lives, and we are still all alive and hopefully thriving. So I wouldn't consider it that particularly threatening. But an AI that learns is where our comfort level gets a little threatened. So that's what AI is for me, and why is important for underserved community. And the opportunities are many. One of them, I think, is, for instance, lowering the cost of certain services, including medical, including certain services that actually should be more accessible to all communities. So that's one of the opportunities. Unfortunately, the danger associated to an AI and underserved communities are, unfortunately, quite many more, and I'm sure that my panelists here will delve into it, but it all depends on the data that we input and that AI. If the data is flawed, if the data has biases, and that data will have biases because we're human and we are biased, and we give that data to the AI, then therefore these biases will be propagated and potentially enhanced by the AI. So, and that's where all the issues, social issues related to the underserved communities come up. And I stop here because we have 1 hour.
Originally when they said it was an hour and a half, I said, are we going to build an AI machine? I mean, like, that's a lot of time. So kind of going on the evolution idea there, I think we're on a natural evolution path. I know people were talking about Web3, last couple of years, which seems like a lot of nonsense. NFTs, blockchain is important if it's used in the right thing, but it wasn't going to solve all ills. I think generative AI really is what I think of as Web3. We're all used to what I call the Google machine. So, you go in and ask the Google for certain things. And then if you start to play with something like a Chat GPT and there, or others, but that's one I played the most with, you start to query things differently. And I'm still not good on the prompt. Like I have my colleagues that are getting all this great stuff. And I'm like, I am not asking the right questions. So then I go back to Google and then I kind of feel like the Google machine's a little dumb. I mean, I'm like, I have to ask it more questions and more specific things where the Chat GPT is making some assumptions along with me as it gets smarter, which is the whole idea of, it gets smarter as the language models, spends more time with people. So I love the idea that we are going to have to actually spend less time with the machines if we make the machines help us get smarter. Where right now we're spending an incredible amount of time still on screens. And so that's part of the evolution. And this is like a baby lesson of like how, just real fundamental AI can help you. So my last name is Tews, even though it's spelled Tews, sounds like a two. If you call and get a receptionist and tell them that you want a lunch reservation at noon for 3 for Tews, I'm going to spend 5 minutes on the phone with that girl. But if I can use Open Table or Resia, when it's like one of my favorite things in the world. And I also love the fact that I'm not hurting anyone's feelings when I delete. And I'm like, I have to go. I have to cancel. The machine's not going to yell at me. I don't have any emotions about that. So there's certain things that I love moving into an era where I just need an interaction. I don't need a lot of human contact right now. And I think that that's where I see that we will hopefully see more of this. And then we will understand as, I'm going to let these two do the science and the math, but, the idea that we need to make sure that we're collaborating on what it is that needs to have that human element and human intervention at some point and human thought in the beginning of the process, and then let the machines do what they do best.
Yeah. So the way that I define AI is that it's people that teach computers how to do tasks at a certain time, right? Based on examples. And right now, the tasks that we're teaching them are relatively easy, right? The productivity things that we're talking about, making reservations for people. But as we've gotten, started to take on different tasks like self-driving cars or trying to find out different things based on prompts, it's getting harder and harder. So I think that it's important to remember that when we teach these AI machines how to do things, we're teaching them things that happen at a specific time, and they're based on the examples just that they're given. So, yeah.
And I think, in listening to everybody, I have a different kind of perspective of AI, which I'll share just to your questions, and then I'll be quiet. I mean, I think like everybody said, this is like the next stage of scientific inquiry, right? When it comes to computational models that can go way beyond, I think what Shane was talking about, very static applications like search engines. We're now seeing AI that has the potential to predict certain behaviors based on the repetitive tasks that we're engaged in as human beings and communities and even objects. And there are different parts of it, right? We started maybe a couple of years ago paying attention to like positioning and recommendation systems, those systems that tell us to buy Black shoes all the time, like me, right? Or those systems that essentially are predictive in terms of what you might, where you might actually go or show up. And then there's this part of AI that's come in the last few years, which is actually more generative, related to deep neural networks, which is what scares me and keeps me up at night, which is really taking biometric information, socio-behavioral information, and putting them into the same computational systems, making decisions on your suitability for employment, healthcare, educational status, et cetera. And so you ask this question of like, why should communities of color care? Well, we should care because guess what? The more these systems become smart and have the predictive ability to do what they do, the greater precision of discrimination against people who are typically surveilled and over-profiled when it comes to data. And so we've got to care. On the one hand, we want AI to do what it does best, which is to help us solve really large, complex problems like climate change and, vaccination challenges that we had. But we also need to care in this room because that same AI that was not necessarily protected under civil rights law and statutes can become so opaque that you don't even know that it's making certain decisions around you. And we also have to care, and I like the way Seth sort of talked about it, right? it's not only trained on what's happening at that time, but it's trained on decades of trauma that has been waged against African Americans, Latinos, Asian Americans, the LGBT community, and tribal persons. So this conversation becomes more relevant as we talk about AI, because we're no longer talking about whether or not I should watch a movie at 10 o'clock at night. That's a genre that I like. It's basically determining whether or not I should have a job, social mobility, where it's surveilling us in ways that I'm happy we're having this conversation, and kudos to the organizations doing this, my friends in the civil rights movement, because it actually does encroach upon civil rights challenges going forward. So I hate to be the pessimist, but.
No, Nicol, that's important. And I want to ask you to dig in a little deeper on that and talk about, examples that you've seen that are already occurring where AI is working at the disadvantage of these communities.
Yeah, so I'll talk about it in terms of context, right? First and foremost, let's talk about law enforcement. So we know in the criminal justice system, we already know in this room that most of our faces or biometric data is captured through law enforcement. And as a result of that, it gives us certain trade-offs. There's certain conveniences. You all know by now that your face is somewhere when you go to an airport, and if you choose to, you can scan your passport, your image is in somebody's database, the FBI, Border Control, the government, and we give that trade-off of our data and our privacy every day. But what happens with AI and law enforcement, particularly among law enforcement that are not properly trained on the tool, you are using AI for facial match. So when we start to look at the use of AI to find perceived criminals, let's just talk about a couple of use cases. One use case is Robert Williams in Detroit that was misidentified through a grainy photo that ran through an AI system that a lot of my colleagues have sort of suggested for efficiency in terms of trying to find a criminal. Well, guess what? We arrested him with that AI. We arrested him in front of his family. No, actually, we detained him for 6 hours, and then we found out that was not him. There's a long list of people who have actually been subjected to that type of misidentification. In deep neural network AI, we know that African-American men and Latinos are subjected to that technology for pre-screening for job applications. So what happens to those people that just think they're given an average video to maybe get a job opportunity they're interested in? Well, the AI picks up on the fact that they don't look directly into the camera, suggesting that they don't make good eye contact. They may not smile. Part of the challenges with AI is a couple of things that I write about. Who's at the table making the decisions and assumptions of people's behaviors? This data has to come from somewhere. So if it's based on these everyday things that we do, let me remind myself, African Americans have the highest rate of arrests. Our communities are mostly surveilled, so we're most likely to show up in the database. So that means that those behaviors get baked into these computational systems. So John, to your point, I spent a lot of time thinking about that. As a sociologist, how do you break down the socio-technical implications that come with new models that are not built by us, but applied to us, that continue to make us the subject of systems of repression that at the end of the day just give us the same results. Renee Cummings at UVA, I always quote her, she used this term that has stuck with me for 2 years. She calls it traumatized data that goes into these AI systems that actually gives us the same results. So this is not to suggest that we can't retrain the models, but it does say something, folks, about, and particularly for this panel, the technology that we have is the technology that we have. No computer wakes up and says, hey, I'm gonna be a racist today, but it's actually placed within a context where there's already the type of fractured scenarios and institutions. And I can keep going on and on, but of course I wanna stop. But I think that's something that we have to continue to interrogate when we look at these models.
Thanks. That's really interesting stuff. Seth, you mentioned when you defined AI, you said, I think something like people who do something. It starts with people, right? So you are involved in designing AI systems. So are there strategies or design principles that people who are working in the AI field need to keep uppermost in their minds? Yeah.
So one of the things that I'm really passionate about is explainable AI. And I think that could go a long way in dealing with some of the things that Nicol talked about. For example, in these facial recognition systems, a lot of times with these deep neural network models, we make a decision something comes out of the model, but we don't know what exactly went into the decision, what parameters were important, and what features and the inputs were important in making that decision. And often when we have tools that do explainable AI, those are tools that are used to convince business executives, or they're tools that are used to convince AI engineers. So what we would like to see in the future are tools that go right to the end user and say, hey, this is why we made this decision. This is the specific inputs that we saw in making that decision that led to our final decision. So for example, when I went to the doctor's office, I went to the eye doctor, and he showed me an X-ray of my retina because I had been a year without seeing it. And when he showed it to me, I was like, so how do you decide that I have a healthy eye? And he says, well, if you look right here, I'm looking for this to be this color, and I'm looking for here for a detachment on the retina. If we can make AI systems that do something similar in computer vision, that would say, hey, these are the pixels that we made the decision for, and show it to the end user, so that the technician can say, hey, this is how we made that decision. I think that we'd get a lot more buy-in from underserved communities, and we'd be able to make some of the advances that we talked about in bringing down the cost of certain things like healthcare. So, yeah.
And Shane, I assume through your perch at AEI, your focus is more on private sector and what the market is doing, how the marketplace is incorporating AI into, economic systems. How do you think the private sector is doing with AI development? And are there particularly good examples and particularly bad examples for this audience?
So I had a great experience, and this is a little beyond AI. It goes on to virtual reality and some things that you can do in that where you're using a kind of a mix of the two. I was speaking in Wisconsin, and I'm just because it's DC, I'm going to tell you this part of the story. He walked up and asked me, he goes, hey, so you live in DC? And I said, yeah. He goes, do you know my cousin? And I'm like, I don't know who's your cousin. He goes, Valerie Jarrett. And I said, no, I don't know Valerie Jarrett, but I love that he kind of wanted to tell me his, So I said, well, what are you working on here at Wisconsin? He said, well, and he was an older gentleman. He said, I've been in this area. I have been working on mechanical engineering for years. And I wanted to see how, he goes, but I love VR. I love I was like, you like the goggle part? He goes, no, but I think it's got interesting things that can go on with this. And I wanted to bring the companies that I've been working with for years at, with the University of Wisconsin into this new era. And I said, well, give me an example. He said, so, and I'm going to forget the name. It was one of the HVAC companies. He said, you get these new engineers that have not seen some of the machines that might be, this is a newer building, but they're on top of a building. This HVAC is 25 years old. And he's like, we don't want to take the time to bring that guy off the building, have to rummage around. Like, how do we get the most efficient way to fix this system? He said, so he uses, on his phone, he videotapes it, and it'll come up automatically, like what model it is, what they think the current, problems are on it. If he can diagnose the problem, it'll pop up a video, or it'll show it on top of the device that he's looking at, and we'll tell him if he has the parts in his current bag, or does he need to go back down to the van. But all of this is saving time, and it's also allowing them to learn about these machines and not get tagged out for being like, hey, you're not going to be able to use, we're not going to send these guys on engineering, trips that are of a certain age because they're just not going to know the equipment. And he said it's been really interesting just learning how to integrate what is really, it's something I'd never thought about. I never thought about how you're putting these engineers into situations where they're like, I have never seen, this thing is so old, but yet they're still, they have the ability to manage it. Or you have the invert of that, which is you have new equipment and you want people that can stay up to breast with it and not lose the time. And so the ability of the machines to be able to kind of balance out the information that's needed, the ability to do 2 or 3 minute video. And I also love that it's like what everybody in their 20s and 30s want to do. They want to watch a video, right? They would actually rather watch YouTube to learn something than go talk to their superior. So they figured out how to integrate this. And this is something that they're working on at the University of Wisconsin, and I'm sure others are as well. But I just thought it was a really fascinating way to see how we're seeing the integration of all these components of kind of the next generation of technology.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that we could have everyone on the panel respond to that, and we will get to more back and forth between the panels.
His company is In Your Face, which I love because it's having the device on when you first learn. But yeah.
Yes. So Caterina, I know I joked about particle physics before, but I really am curious as to sort of the perspective you bring to the issue, having had a science background, and then you worked with the UN and in global institutions, and now you're in a legal organization. So just talk a little bit about what that background informs for you on AI.
I think that what my background informs is that I probably look at innovation a little less scared than most, if you will. I mean, because of research and cutting edge was my business. When I look at the AI now, I frame it in a risk management rather than, oh, no, let's not even, not consider that. Let's ban it here, let's ban it there. This cannot be used. Children cannot look at it. I mean, I look more at the pros and cons and risks, because innovation is inevitable. So the worst thing we can do about this is thinking it will go away or do nothing. Because doing nothing means that we will end up being completely unprepared when we actually encounter a challenge, and it will not go away. I mean, this is not going to go away. I remember, I'm old enough to remember when calculators in school were banned. And oh my goodness, children will end up not knowing how to make, long divisions and or how to make math or to learn things because there were calculators and calculators were banned. Nothing happened. The world continued to happen, and each of us has a calculator in their pocket between a phone or a watch. So this is just a way for us to get to learn about it and to get ready. What I bring in non-technical environment is more of a scientific approach to the problem. So let's look at the data. Let's look at the approach. Let's take a positive approach to looking at how can it be used in a positive way, and let's look at the possibilities, because there is doing technology is not inherently bad or good. It all depends how we prepare and how it's used. And back to I heard a couple of things, like, for instance, let's look at the bias and let's fix the bias. That's actually one of the biggest challenges of fixing bias that already exist in AI. Fixing biases is borderline impossible once an AI is trained. You actually have to scrap it and start again, unless you can do like an explainable AI where you can trace back exactly, almost like a programming debugger. Oh, I see why that decision, why AI made up its mind about a specific matter, is because that they learn from that data point or from that data set. Let's remove that data set so it will not get biased that way. But doing something like that is extremely expensive. Even from the point of view of energy consumption, training an AI is extremely expensive. These things have an impact on the environment. So a company that trains an AI will not retrain it. So once the bias is there, it's very, very hard to go back and look it up. So go back and try to remove it. It's like a child. If you teach a child to be biased about something in early age, they will carry that bias forever. They might change their mind. Their behavior might change. They might change their mind, but it takes much harder to change their mind than
once they've been programmed.
Once they've been programmed, exactly.
Yeah.
So can we jump in on that, or are you going to come back? Absolutely. I can come back to that comment.
No, go ahead.
But I want to jump in on that. So I think, as a sociologist, I agree with what everybody has spoken about in terms of like the efficiency of AI and where we actually are seeing a lot of efficiency built into productive measures, whether it's a manufacturing industry or it's products and services. I also think, it's important for us to have explainable AI, meaning that the computational model is well documented so that you're able to trace where there might be a breakdown. What I am challenged by, though, Caterina, is accepting bias. And let me tell you why. Because I think, if we allow computers to sort of assume the same type of legacy systems that we have in society, we're not necessarily innovating them to do anything different. And really, we're creating systems of oppression on the public good side that allows machines to manipulate elections and to manipulate hiring decisions and other suitability decisions for people based on race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, etc., ability. I think it's important for us, and this is where, like in my work, I think it's up to companies, and I like the risk management frameworks, particularly one that just came out of the National Institute for Standards. I like what the White House has done with the AI Bill of Rights. I think what we're trying to do, though, is build a consciousness into companies that maximize their productivity of AI around profits versus people, and to get them to think a little bit about what are the reputational risks. One of the things that I think companies don't think about sometimes is, do you want to be on the front page of a newspaper because you haven't thought about all of these pre-assessment and pre-mitigation tools? It may take longer, and I don't think people really want it to be applied in all use cases. I don't necessarily need AI to figure out if you're going to discriminate against me on a movie recommendation, or if, you know, what I buy is going to be something. What I need a person to actually interrogate is whether or not the system in itself overlays a variety of inferences about me. So you may start out, as LaTanya Sweeney at Harvard says, providing me with financial recommendations for credit cards. But then it also picks up the sounding of my name and offers me higher interest credit card offerings. It may determine that I purchase things at a certain hour, or I purchase things for my kids. So now it's got a digital footprint that can actually, without even asking me my race or gender, know exactly what my internet profile is, which then couches itself within a system that is already sort of tracked and surveilled and predicted, made certain predictions based on who you are. I think for us as like futurists, need to find ways so that we democratize this technology to not do that. And I commonly say, Seth may not, well, you're not a technologist truly because you do work at Booz Allen, right? I do this with high-tech companies to say that we kind of move away from this like laziness when it comes to really thinking about the outcomes of these systems and how they affect people. Because one of the things about Robert Williams in Detroit, who was picked up with facial recognition, as well as the other men that have been picked up in facial recognition, Black men, it's not just being misidentified. It's the consequences of being back in a system where you're arrested in front of your children, you have stress and mental health issues, you've now added on to a criminal profile that was not yours. And in this country, you have the potential of death because now you're back in a system that incarcerates you, but also has the probability of violence. And so I think once we begin to sort of unpack what that looks like, I think we can make distinctions between AI that is more innocuous versus those who are not. And I hope we talk a little bit about how the EU is doing it with regards to high risk and low risk models. But I do think we can't put companies off the hook of centering bias or anti-bias. We're doing something at Brookings in the next couple of weeks called anti-racist AI. You can't put companies off the hook for being less discriminatory. And I think companies need those tools and are looking for those tools to develop more inclusive products. So I'm sorry, I just had to get on my soapbox because that's something that is a very hard technically, but I think it's something that we can do if we actually had more conscious, deliberation around what that looks like.
I didn't mean they shouldn't do it.
Okay.
I said it was hard to do it. I mean, sorry, but you didn't say wrong. I mean, it's like, no.
You did say training a baby off of bias is hard. Listen, it is very hard because we live in a society where they think that that's the norm, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try.
Absolutely. No, absolutely.
Okay.
That was not the implication. Sorry.
I'd like to move on to sort of the public policy arena. You mentioned the White House blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights. There's also work being done at NIST in the Commerce Department on a risk management framework for AI that focuses on the concept of trustworthy AI. This is for really anyone. How successful do you think those efforts are going to be? You know, they're both voluntary. There's no mandatory component to them yet. Do you see that this is, pushing a rock up a big hill, or is it something that is going to build like a snowball?
I think the challenge is getting it out of the proverbial lab and starting to embrace it now and getting as many people engaged on it as possible. So there's another thing that I believe NIST was doing is they announced last week, it's called the NAIR, where they're, but that's more research oriented. It's like getting more and more people to come in. And so if you're looking to do academic work, it's something you should look at is, they want to open more models. They want to make sure that the information flow that they're training on, it has as much data as possible. So it's good to see the government's at least thinking about it. Now let's see if the action comes through. There's also, there's a group that I'm involved with, and I'm sure Nicol's had some things to do with, called Seed AI. This friend of ours who was working with GPUs, so the things that really kind of help the devices go. He's like, we need more people to get engaged in this. He realized this while he was working for this, the company. And so he left the company and said, we need to figure out how to get baseline interest in this at the local level. And so he started working with the Congressional Artificial Intelligence AI Caucus. And what they've done is they've gone to different areas, and I'll use Houston as they've gone to Chicago, but the Houston one was a good example because Houston has a lot of work around healthcare. And so they said, we don't need this to be at all the, I'll call them the fancy pants, universities that are always doing good stuff. We need to get this down to the community college level so we can start to get people that are really engaged and want to learn this and don't have to always be at the Ph.D. level to start into the process. And so they went and worked with Houston colleges or Houston University, as well as several of the medical companies around there and the medical institutions, to say, how do we start this at the grassroots level to bring this at the very beginning of people's education process and think about being in this, having AI as part of the process and being into the training model. So a lot of that is getting down to a level where you have as many people in the process as want to be in the process and get it out of the ivory tower. So I think we're seeing some good movement in that. I think the Congressional AI Caucus is understanding that they have to want to bring it into their congressional districts at a level that is helpful for them rather than just complaining about the process. And so far, I think we're getting a good uptake on that, but I'm an AI optimist.
Nicol?
Yeah, I think there's there's been a lot of movement for like the last 5 years, right? We saw, believe it or not, under the Trump administration, we did see like this requirement to ensure federal agencies had articulated policies on how to use AI. We've seen under the former deputy, Alondra Nelson, a former interim chief and deputy, this White House Bill of Rights, which is basically setting like a framework. It's like a Bill of Rights of what we should expect when it comes to these technologies, from the development side to its use to any type of evaluation post. Shane's talked about the NAIR. I was actually part of this oversight committee, which I think is actually really exciting. It's a way to do more research. So the things that we're talking about here, the NAIR is providing resources, particularly focused on HBCUs and others, HSIs, to be able to come in and be part of the game-changing conversations that are happening in AI research, which again, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, right? So having the ability to do research really matters. I think what the expectation in the United States, though, which is interesting, is that it starts with like the self-regulatory awareness, right? So NIST, as you all know, only takes an AI up to the point of certification, basically certifies it like a car, gives the UL Underwriter Lab certification of a particular technology. But going forward, it's really going to take people who are sitting in this room, civil society organizations, it's going to take, industry, it's going to take government, but it's an all hands on deck strategy, as Shane said, to take this momentum and to make it work. We're behind when it comes to any type of regulatory force with this, or regulatory regime. And there's some, debate on what regulation should look like. We've got to say to ourselves, I just came back from South by Southwest. If we're still talking about privacy legislation and AI is out the box, we're kind of in trouble. We're behind, right? We really need some groundbreaking national federal privacy legislation to set the standards for models that actually rely upon your data to build themselves. But I think going forward, we're going to see, as Shane said, a lot of movement, but we're not necessarily going to see the central intelligence, I think, in this country to allow us to bring the groundswell of people together to really think about this technology. I think for the sake of government, it's more about the public interest, right? And so we got to say, who's watching out for the public interest? And right now, just to go a step further, John, the FTC is somewhat looking at it. The DOJ is somewhat looking at it, but there's not, again, a central office of some sort or some kind of central intelligence across the agencies to think clearly about the impact on the consumers in the long run.
Yeah, and you mentioned Europe before, and what the European Union had done with GDPR in the privacy realm, and with the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act, and sort of the platform regulation and content moderation. They're now discussing an AI Act, which may be, within a few months of getting finalized. So for anybody, can you talk about sort of the AI Act and how Europe is looking at this, and what that may portend for industries that have global reach?
I'll go out of my optimism box on my cynicism box here for a second. So they actually have a wonderful person, I can't think of Peter's last name, who works for the European Commission here.
Fennelly.
Yeah, and he was, no, there's two, that's the other Peter. There's two Peters. So he's actually been on my podcast, Explain to Shame, and we did talk about AI as well as a couple other things. And the thing it took me a while to figure out, this is why I'm the cynicist here, is that, we know our process of government here in the United States, and sometimes it takes a long time to get something across the finish line, but hopefully we've thought about it along the way. The Europeans completely invert that process, and they throw all the rules out and they go, yeah, good luck. And then you're like, are they going to actually do anything about this? Do I have to be worried? And they're like, well, how big are you? How many things can they fine? If you're in the low to middle, you're probably okay. Just keep moving forward. They're not going to get to you yet. And you're like, how? And then you got the nation states that may get around to it, depending on if it's a commission report. So it always sounds a little scary when the Europeans are up to something, but you realize you got a good 5-10 year lag on that, which is the invert of how we do things here. It took me a while to figure that out, and I still can't figure out half their process.
Well, and I would say, like, on the European model, I think it is interesting because I think they've taken a lot more duty of care review of human and civil rights, right? Even though they have different human and civil rights there than we have here to a certain extent. But I do think that they had a greater review of what those implications are. The challenge with the EU compared to the United States is they're basically regulating American companies, right? And so you have a very prescriptive framework of what is acceptable and not acceptable. And you basically can ask anybody in the EU and they'll tell you, if you don't follow the rules, it's not going to happen, right? Whereas here, there's a lot more flexibility because we thrive off of capitalism and innovation. So to a certain extent, we've not fully adopted that type of regime. At the end of the day, I think that there's a paradigm or lessons to be learned from what Europe is doing. I mean, even China has a privacy policy, even Australia, there's a lot of other countries that are much more progressive. And I think the paradigm that we should sort of look at is what we govern, which is our public interest, right? What does it look like as a public good? Where can we as a government think about those international models and think about the extent to which there's a regulatory pulse to ensure that it's equitable, it's inclusive, and it's universally available in ways that do not create further harms. And that's something I think here. I think the other thing that we have to interrogate, this is particularly for this audience, is the extent to which we do become too prescriptive in this country that we allow the monopoly of the few companies that are doing this to stay doing this because it becomes burdensome, right, for minority-owned and women-owned businesses to actually go into AI. Think about what just happened with Silicon Valley Bank, right? I was just torn just the other day looking at LinkedIn at Black, female, Asian, Latina founders who were basically putting their stories on LinkedIn about not meeting payroll because they really needed that bank. So I think we have to also think about whatever regulation that comes forth, is it flexible enough? Is it less burden for people who don't have the capital, don't have the lawyers to actually, and don't have the money to actually mitigate some of the fines that come with not adhering to them? Think about all the people who cannot do business who are small minority owned in Europe just because of the protections of GDPR. So I think, John, to your point, again, I think that there are things that we can learn. But I think it's sort of in this case now where we're just trying to figure out where we should jump in, right? And I think that's what the White House tried to do by doing a soft landing with the Bill of Rights. They didn't usurp or take power that they didn't have. They put out something that's not necessarily legally binding and enforceable, but they're starting the conversation in a way I think that's just raising awareness and attention around it.
So oftentimes, and when regulation is being discussed, the pushback is, but that will harm innovation. Mm-hmm. And, this seems like an area that argument is going to play out and, may have some actual validity in this instance, as it does in many. But, how do you balance the need to maintain an innovative and competitive marketplace with the need to regulate, to prevent or mitigate harms?
Can I take this one?
Sure.
So I don't think it will harm innovation. It might actually slow down. It might harm the pace of innovation, which is not necessarily bad. I mean, right now, innovation is outpacing our ability to approach this matter ethically.
Mhm.
We need to get our bearings.
Yes.
And if innovation speeds up and goes as fast as now, we are not going to be able to catch up. So I actually think that regulation is our opportunity to pause, to give some ground rules, and to sort of put rails on. I like the AI Act, the European Union AI Act. It's kind of difficult to say because it actually has these categorization of the application of AI, the high risk, the low risk. So it measures the regulations that the regulatory tools based on the risk of the different type of AI. So low risk, not much regulated, high risk, highly regulated. So, and it makes sense. You know, for something is harmless, I don't want to regulate it, but if something has an impact because it contains medical records, private records, financial records, then let's take a look at it a little more carefully. And let's make sure there are no social bias, racial bias, and so on. So, and in that case, to me, regulation is what says, okay, innovation, speed of innovation is not a value. Speed of innovation is just something that happens. Let's do it right rather than having to do it again. So that to me is what actually the value of regulation is, give us the chance to actually catch up with the ethical framework that we need to have for AI to be a successful endeavor in the future and not leave anybody behind or hurt.
Anyone want to comment on
Yeah,
that?
I definitely agree with that. And you already talked about the high costs of retraining a model. So right now, if you go through the process, you train a model, you find out that there's disparate impact, whether or not the engineers wanted to do something or not, there's an impact, we have to fix it. You have to go back and train that model again. What if we slowed down? We got more multidisciplinary in our teams, had our engineers talk to people of color, however, engineers talk to the communities and the end users that are going to be using their tools. And maybe we can find some of these issues before we go and spend $400,000 to train GPT-4, you know?
Yeah.
So that's what I'll add.
Yeah, I mean, I think cost is relative, but I do think, you know, being able to have a process where you can build in these gap stops where you're able to evaluate, audit the technology is really important. And I'll push it even further. I think that you should have people sitting at the table in the beginning, right? Where you're actually thinking about who's around you that's helping you to sort of interrogate the truth of these models so that you can look at innovation. And this is where I find where technology is really funny with me, where it's like, well, we're going to go back and we're going to fix the model. Can you tell us what we should do to fix the model after it's like already done all this stuff? And I'm like, well, why don't you just put some more people at the table, right? And allow them to help you build models that out the gate start more inclusive and then build edge, you know, edge factors like civil rights audits, impact assessments, you know, things like that to help the AI actually evolve with innovation is less daunting, right? And you manage ethics throughout the whole process. So it's not something that happens at the front and then the end.
Other than jawboning to make that happen, what could government do to try to affect that result?
I think you brought a very good point about the public interest, because part of it is that we all have agency in this, right?
Yes.
We all have an interest in our future being better because of AI, but to do that, it is making sure that you have representation. And the government, I think, gets that, and they're starting to bring that in at multiple levels in the process. And I think that's a good first step.
Yeah. I think you can incentivize two companies. So like there's a couple of models that I've been working on, which is anybody ever buy a dishwasher at Best Buy or any other big box store? You ever see that big yellow label that sits up there and you kind of go to those products that have the yellow label, primarily because it's a sign that this has been part of an industry collaboration, a civil society collaboration. It's been tested for electricity, durability. So I've been thinking about like, what's an Energy Star rating to show us that this technology is anti-racist, right? So people could actually trust this technology diligence, like going to the bank. If I give my money, please put it in the vault because I'm gonna be looking for it in my balance, right? We need something. I was equating it the other day to like when we went from HTTP to HTTPS, right? We had some sign, a better housekeeping seal that the AI was actually going to be more inclusive because people thought about us in the process. So I think you have to incentivize companies to do that. I think as consumers, to Shane's point, we have agency. We should be able to say, this algorithm is not me. Stop showing me stuff about, I just recently got married. I don't want to see no more young, good looking single men on my feed, okay? I have one, right? Like, stop showing me that. I might occasionally look at Idris Elba, but don't mean I want to see everybody on my feed looking like him, right? The bottom line is we should have some agency to actually allow our companies to know that they're doing a good job. And then I think, the other incentive that we should be doing for government is for government to think about, like, and for this audience is so relevant, like, do we have the right civil rights laws in place in a digital domain? Do we have the right ways for us to say that my housing decision was, foreclosed on because of X? Like, we didn't find that out with Facebook until a few people came forward and said, I'm not seeing the same housing ads. Then we realized they were allowing advertisers to check off communities. Some of us in this room, we don't see the pay buy now, pay later ads because of the opacity of the internet. So I think we have to find ways to engage civil society, whether through some type of commission, but also reevaluate, do we have the right protections in this new digital space? And I think unfortunately, we don't have a level of literacy around this. My mother still calls me and asks me why the cookies are chasing her, right? Like, we just don't understand it enough. And as people of color, it's not a bad thing that we don't understand it. It's an added task to the other civil liberties and human rights that we're fighting for. So we've got to also figure out how to make sense of this, for ourselves so that we can play an integral part in making sure it's a civil rights concern.
So we're running a little bit low on time, but I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about this new era of AI called generative AI. Is it really that different from the AI that we've grown to know over the past few decades? It seems like it is because it's got something, it's creating something, not just pushing a decision at you. Anyone want to talk about that?
Sure. Just raise of hand, who actually knows how an AI works? I mean, what is the logical mechanism behind an AI?
Why don't you tell us?
Okay, so AIs work by associations. They do not think. That's funny. It's really scary because we call it intelligence and we call it generative, but AI doesn't think. AI associates things. Yes. So that's why it's so dangerous, because they don't have self-awareness of when they actually associate wrong things. And they just learn from the things that we give them. So there's an example that actually, I don't know if you read about it, but it came out recently. So someone asked ChatGPT if it's heavier, a pound of feather or a pound of lead. ChatGPT correctly said a pound, that they weigh the same. And then it was asked, what is heavier, 2 pounds of feather or 1 pound of lead? And ChatGPT replied, they weigh the same. Not because it doesn't know math, it doesn't know math, but it's because in all the sentences, in all the text they collected from the web, the example of the pound of feather and pound of lead came up so many times. So ChatGPT thinks that feathers and lead weight the same. So when they say feather, weight, equal. That's all it knows. So regardless of what number you put in front of either of them, it will always reply that it weighs the same, because that's what it learned. When I see feathers and lead, they weigh the same. It does not understand the concept of quantity in front, so which is pretty elementary. So, and this is not like to say that it's stupid. I composed a very nice essay for the introduction of this panel, but don't be scared, because all it does is associate things. And the things that it associates, we give it to them. We give it. So it's up to us to provide the right data so that it learns math. So it learns the concept and it continues to fix itself. I'm sure that now someone, embarrassed by the feather, they went and corrected. There's a developer that is going to the model and make sure that doesn't happen anymore. But that's one of the things that, so it is scary because it talks our language. DALL-E, paints and does beautiful artistic things. So, but they don't create. They are machines that look at stuff in the past. So actually, I know I have a weird background, but I also have classical studies. And one of the things I study in depth is actually Dante's Infernos and all the other two sets of the Divina Commedia. And one of the chasm of the Inferno, they are seers, people who were foreseeing the future. They're actually Inferno because, religion at the time, the Catholic Church was forbidding people to foresee the future. And their punishment is having eyes in the back of the head because all they can see is the past. And besides, the morality about it is like having the eyes in the back of your head is a punishment. You can only see the past. You can only see your mistakes. And I think, all these generative AI, they only see the past because they only look at the data in the past. They don't create. So for us humans, is absolutely mandatory and imperative that we do not lose the ability to create, the ability to think objectively and analytically about the impact of AI in our world. Because if we do, we become, if we all take AI, we will never evolve again. We will never look far again. So that to me is what AI is a computer with the eyes in the back of their head. Yeah. They don't create, they just shuffle.
Nicol, I know what you're going to say.
well, no, with the generative piece, so it's been interesting. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not a tech pessimist. I'm in this space, been in the space for a long time. I just look at these models and I just think to myself, like, where are the sociologists sitting at the table, the classical literature people, like who's doing a cut of this. But I do think that with ChatGPT, there's a couple things that we're not up on yet, right? First, I do think we just had an article about this in Brookings. The snapshot of data that is training ChatGPT is not current data. So we have to keep that in mind, that it is actually accumulation of past data, which can create the biased results that we see. So far, they've been less biased than most. It all depends on the context. But one thing that I got a chance to meet the people from ChatGPT. One thing that I asked, though, which I think is pertinent to this group, is the power of language, though. There are challenges that I have with ChatGPT, not the stuff about, young people are going to use it and write papers. I mean, I know even at Brookings, we're thinking about our educational integrity process, but are you represented in this generative technology, right? So when you think about language, I'm from New York. We say, you know what I'm saying a lot, right? My people are from South Carolina. They got Gullah language. So I asked the guy, I said, to what extent does ChatGPT also represent the cultural efficacy of groups where language is a powerful tool? Whatever your dialect is, the language that you're trained on. We barely, have translatable languages when it comes to privacy policies of Asian dialects as well as Latin dialects. And one of the things he said is, we're not there yet. We're still picking up on those cues. So I would actually encourage us to think about any of these new technologies that have basically left the gate, the extent, again, to who's at the table and how are they building in our lived experiences into these technologies. When I think about that, I think about a young kid who goes to ChatGPT because they heard about it. They try to talk into it or write something. Literacy is another area. Like, this is a hypertextual technology that doesn't recognize that a good portion of Americans are illiterate. So to me, those are things that we need to consider, again, on the public interest side, as we think about whether or not government decides to use ChatGPT for screening or industry. The other thing I would just say about ChatGPT, which is a general technology, which is dear and dear to my heart, is when you're not online and you're part of the digital divide, you're not seeing any of this stuff. In fact, you're actually the end product of the end product. At some point, you'll catch up, but you are basically excluded from this whole digital ecosystem. And so as we have these conversations around the future of generative technology, I'm like, hold up, can I just finish working on this algorithmic accountability and get some people online? Because these technologies are going to begin to be institutionalized in ways that, again, they make decisions about people's future outcomes and fate. And so again, we have to, as a community, continue just to interrogate who's at the table. Is public interest in civil rights embedded into that? Is the lived experiences of people who are the subjects of this technology even thought about in the design and execution and audit of that? And then the last thing I would say is, and where do we expect this technology not to be used? Because it's not coming in the gate as a fair and equitable technology based on, again, generative AI, illiteracy, dialect, where you're from, what country you're from, your status is, in terms of foreign born. Things like that to me are what keeps me up at night, right? When I think about generative AI. So like Caterina, I'm really excited about technology. I'm all for it. I got like the latest gadgets. I'm there. But I also look at these things with a lens of, am I the only digital native that's benefiting from this? And I think, again, for this conversation of representing in our communities, we have to interrogate these technologies. And you don't have to be a technologist to ask those questions, which is the biggest thing that I think we have to get across. Nobody in this room has to be an engineer. I did not pass computer science when I was in college. It took me a long time to get that cow across the finish line to take that class, right? Y'all know what I'm talking about. It was that one class we had to put all the numbers in. I'm old. You had to use all the codes on. We didn't even have what you have today. But we have to convince young people and others from our communities you don't have to take these degrees and careers to know what we're talking about.
Just, I'm going to raise one other issue and then we'll end, having to do with another very active topic in the news these days, and has to do with content and what we see on our devices, which is determined to large part by recommendation algorithms, which is AI. Nicol, I've heard you and others talk about this as a potential civil rights issue, having to do with sort of human autonomy. Mm-hmm. Shouldn't we have a greater right to determine what content is shown to us than we are getting now? Can you talk a little bit about that? And then anyone else who...
I was watching the Gonzalez versus Google case, right, after hours, and my daughter was like, why is C-SPAN so loud in our house? I gotta listen to what this says, right, for work. And I found it so interesting that like most of the justices did not know what this was, right? They were just, and when it got down to the case as to whether or not someone turned extremist because of the exposure of YouTube to ISIS, the real question of that case was, what are these algorithms and should we be paying attention to them? And I think it's important for us to realize, like, when I try to break out algorithms, and Seth can, kind of pick up from here too, is these are very personalized transactions and interactions that we have with the internet. If you are a cyclist, at a certain point, you're just going to see things related to cycling and other things and interests that you like, because we live this world where we're liking affinity groups and things that are comfortable to us. If you're on a playground when you were growing up, when you went outside for recess, there were monkey bars, there were swings, there were slides. And if you remember recess back in the days, you picked your little piece and you stayed on there, and then you went to the next thing when the slide got open or the swing got open. The world of algorithms right now is that the white supremacists are sitting there on the monkey bars doing their thing. There are cyclists that are sitting on the slide. And then there are other different groups that are sitting within the same playground, basically being fed content of interest to them, whether it's extremists, whether it's cultural, whether it's family oriented. And then there are those of us that have a whole bunch of everything coming at us. We have to be concerned that we have a medium that allows the type of triggered violence that actually finds itself within our communities. I think we fought too hard to be safe in this country. It took us 100 years for anti-lynching legislation. It took a long time for us to get away from the type of Asian American hate, but yet we're seeing it again. And we have to question whether or not the technology is emboldening that. So I do think that companies, I don't know if this case is going to solve it. Most likely it's not going to do anything on Section 230 but I think it raises a really important question, which is, what does our public and private squares look like? and who is saying what, and what is it that we don't know the other people are saying. And if you're like all of us pretty much in this room who come from different backgrounds where we have dealt with vulnerability all of our lives, we ought to be concerned about this, because we do not want these communities to build up to the point where they continue the type of egregious violence and hate towards us. And I think that part of that conversation is not there. I mean, Shane could disagree in terms of some of the conversation we have in Section 230. We're really not making that association with communities of color where certain content to a certain extent should be reviewed and deliberated to make sure that people feel safe. And we're seeing that too with teens. I mean, it's an interesting conversation to watch it, but for people of color, it's even more interesting because you should be paying attention to these things and then matching that with news and outcomes in this 21st century world and saying to yourself, is there an association between the technology and the action that's not actually being discussed?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. Content moderation is also not equally good for all things, like for things like pornographic information. There's like a 96% of that they'll block the content if you're looking at TikTok's algorithm. Hate speech and bullying is about 14%, right? Where those things just kind of fall through the cracks of their content moderation algorithms. And something that we've also seen with GPT and these content moderation algorithms was that humans play an important role in moderating content. And human content moderators, both at companies like Twitter, at Facebook, at TikTok, that's really fallen by the wayside. You see these horrible stories about content moderators and the working conditions that they are working under and the trauma that is not being treated for these people. So you have content moderation that's these people that are labeling data that then gets fed back into the models. If they don't have the resources and the mental health resources to be able to do this job, you're going to have turnover, you're going to have worse labeling, and we're going to get worse models. It's the same thing for ChatGPT, because ChatGPT is a reinforcement learning model that does supervised learning, but it's also a reinforcement learning model with humans in the loop. So you prompt something and it gives you back a bunch of stuff. And then what the humans do is they rank the responses, so they rank, this is the best response, this is the next best response, and so on and so forth. Humans play an important role. And if, those humans aren't being taken care of, and if we don't have the right humans in the loop as well, in both content moderation and talking about ChatGPT, we're going to leave some of these underserved communities behind. So that's something that I'm looking for when we train ChatGPT 4 is if we learn any more about those humans in the loop. But I'll let the rest of the people.
So two things. It's the humans that are horrible, not the machines. I always said it starts somewhere, right? And it starts with the humans. And I took your question very literally. So a colleague of ours, Matt Perot, wrote a piece called Section 230 Won't Protect ChatGPT. And it's a good long article where he just very specifically calls out that we're going to need a specific liability regime to allow to be deployed on this type of technology before crippling it with lawsuits and court fees. So I take Matt's point of view on that.
Anything from you, Caterina?
Yeah, no, there's one matter also that I think is quite important on how we teach AI is that these machines are taught with a positive model. So the developers tell them how things are, but they never tell them how things are not.
That's right.
So it's because it's easy to say, this carpet is gray, but then you have to say, but it's not red, it's not yellow, it's not blue. I mean, where does it end? So it becomes very, and that is how it's difficult to make moderation, because for instance, I know the screening for pornographic material is easy because it's screened by color of skin. That lots of color that looks like skin color, it must be, if half of the screen is full of that color, that's pornographic material. I mean, 99%. That is very basic, but bullying, psychological abuse, messaging, how it's too subtle for a machine to capture unless you go in a much harder and much more subtle training. So there are a lot of issues that are associated with that. I think the best we can do in the long term is actually teach children since very early age critical thinking, critical analysis, but certainly it depends on the quality of the schools. It depends on the support they have in their communities, and therefore it will affect more underrepresented community than anybody else. So the digital divide will only widen rather than getting narrower, and that's very sad. So I think that the issue of the digital divide with the AI, like pretty much with anything else, it's a bottom-up issue that we have to start working from the ground with infrastructure, education, social support of the underserved communities, because the AI is the tip of the iceberg, but if we don't fix everything else, it's going to be a very, very hard problem to solve.
And John, can I just say something real quick? I know
Sure. Last word.
Caterina gave that great example of these machines having eyes behind their head. And I think that's why we're having this conversation, right? Because I don't know about you, but I don't want eyes behind somebody's head, right? I want to walk safely, knowing that I'm walking a straight line into something that actually takes the whole embodiment of who I am into account, my human and civil liberties, my, biometric beauty, whatever the case may be. And the reason I'm saying this, when I was at MMTC, David Honig and I talked a lot about application inequity at that time, which is different applications were basically discriminating against people, like photo tagging, which at one point Google labeled Black Americans as primates versus Black people, because the developer, when they did the ID, the photo map, thought we were animals, gorillas. That type of stuff is still happening. And that was 5 years ago. So I think, for this community, it's really important to think about, yes, we have to sort of embrace those eyes behind the head that consider us to be marginalized and multi-marginalized people. Got it. But I think we also have to decide which part of history we want to be on and be much more aggressive around saying it is just not acceptable for technology to instigate people to go out there and stab me, because the community has heard these reinforcing messages. And I think that's where regulation right now is so bent up on the technology and not necessarily bent up on the conversations in terms of public interest and public good and social and civil rights. So, just something to think about, as we go forward, where do the civil rights sit in the regulation? And I think that might help us to frame this outside of the bits and the bytes and really get more contextualization around it.
Okay. Well, we're going to leave it there. I want to thank AT&T for hosting us, and to ALLvanza, MMTC, and OCA, and Rosa, and Bob, and Tews for putting together such a great panel. Please join me in thanking our panel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan, for moderating the panel today, and all the panelists for taking the time to be here. OCA is actually one of less than about 10 national API, Asian American Pacific Islander organizations who work on tech and telecoms issues, right? Despite certain Asian American ethnic groups being overrepresented in engineer and technician level jobs, not all, but some, we know that there are many APIs who are still left behind in our society due to the digital divide, right? And so that's why we're in partnership with ALLvanza, MMTC, our sister orgs like the Japanese American Citizens League in the room, and others to tackle these issues of access and equity, right? So we look forward to continuing these conversations and want to thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, too. On behalf of MMTC, we're happy to be here. And, as I was listening, some thoughts came to mind. I'm a very simple person, so I'll put real simply what I heard today, which is basically bad data in, bad results out. I heard that, as we would say in the play Hamilton, we got to be in the room where it happens. And that's why we wanted to do this session. I think today we looked at AI, the 3 organizations, and we said, look, this is going to be something that's going to be very important to our communities. We don't want to stop innovation, but sometimes it needs to be slowed down. And that's what we want to be able to do, to be able to have you in this room today with us. And as you leave here, to be able to have an impact, to talk to the people who are in charge of AI, to make sure that is done properly. So we thank you in the audience, as well as we thank the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then this panel was recorded and will be posted on all of our social media pages if you want to share it to your colleagues.
Oh, I didn't see that.
You mentioned Latanya Sweeney.
Yes.
She was my
Oh,
housekeeper.
oh, was she?
Yeah.
I love her. So you know whose dissertation I reviewed? Jinyan Zhang, who's actually wrote on the Facebook ads.
Right,
So I
yeah.
got to go up there and like hang out with her and do like their, they had like a seminar and stuff. I love her. I tried to get her to come and do like a non-resident fellow of Brookings, but she's so busy.
I know, yeah.
I think our panelists are going to stick around for just a few minutes. If you have a few questions, you can ask them.
Yeah.
Everyone?
I'm Seth. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay. Can you hear me on this mic?
Panelists,
No.
we need a photo.
Is my mic on? Can you turn it on? Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, but hold on. Because I want the audience to know.
Right. Yeah.
Some biases that we've agreed and using.
I'm Booz Allen. Yeah. But I did some. Not with me, but yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Do a little photo op.
Okay, second hand now. There you go.
Nice to meet you. Look forward to seeing the work you guys are doing. It's awesome.
Oh, good. So we run.
Yeah, we got all same time.
I'll see you on Zoom next week.
Yeah. So we're trying to.
See, this could be a great, so I like how the APA a lot. Like the AI.
And they're trying to dig in like some of the disparate impacts, less odds. And that sort of stuff.
All you do is say yes.
So that's the part like we're still trying to figure, like we're hiring new fellows, right? So I'm actually moving towards that.
Yeah, so the pretty much model like this.
We had no lawyers. I mean, normally we.
I know you have a lot of lawyers.
Which is to say that people who do something like that, and then you have to.
Right. So like, basically, like it's all like shot values. Yeah. They say it's proprietary. It's like 95.
Everywhere, everything, all the time.
Okay. The big lift is the UI.
That's why.
Regulators don't understand that.
Yeah, one thing we're building is this thing called the so we're trying to you go through the process, you like
so what if somebody's
how are you? Good to see you. It's like it's really hard to
yes, we do. Get over
We're jumping on the board. Thank you very much. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
You have a business card? I don't have any.
Not on the menu.
I can reach out.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. Oh, great.
It's really nice to meet you.
Yeah.
They're actually up to in the back corner.
About that a lot. Like, I think generative AI actually has a lot of like potential to be used. So like upsample, where we don't have as much data, like API calls and textbooks. I think that a lot of it is also going to be like, so that's one way, right? Generative AI to try to upsample. The other way is just like, doing better collection, being more humble, like try to collect data. So take like chest X-rays, right? A lot of times, like, or trying to identify skin cancer.